Okay, so I'm here with Swayze Valentine, the UFC's first and only cutwoman. Swayze, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome, good to have you. How's everything over there with the snow at the minute?
Oh my gosh, we're drowning.
Yeah, I've got family who live up that way, so I've heard all about it.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
like a full winter in 1 week. Crazy.
Yeah. So just give me the backstory. How did you first become interested in combat sports and martial arts, and how did that lead you to where you are today?
So I've always been a fan of the sport. And I saw my first live show back home in Alaska way back in 2006. And I was just driving along and I saw a billboard that's like, MMA fights tonight. So I'm like, that'd be pretty cool. So I went in, I bought my ticket, and I went back that evening and I watched the actual fight. And I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. I mean, the atmosphere was cool. Everything was just so intense and just, it was my kind of place. So after the event, I decided to get a hold of like the director, is what they called this gentleman at the time. And I was like, how can I be a part of your event? Like, I really want to do something. I don't know exactly what it is, but I want to do something with your event. And he's like, well, why don't you be a ring girl? And I'm like, okay, that's not really the route I was anticipating, but so I was like, okay, I'll do it. So he had this weekend tournament that he was doing, and he was like, come back and be a ring girl, and then we'll just see how things go. So I went back and I did the ring girl thing, but while I was back there, I saw people wrapping like hands of fighters, and I'm like, dude, that is what I want to do. Like, there's no greater honor than wrapping the hands of like the competitor themselves. I mean, that's what I want to do. And so from then on, like, I just got online and I was just looking at like how to wrap hands, things like that. I'd go to my local gym and wrap fighters in their camps just during sparring sessions, just to get some practice. And then like I just started to get to know them, got to know their camps. And when they would go to fights, I'd go with them. And then I started learning and getting to know the organizations. And I started offering like my services for free because, I mean, let's face it, not many organizations actually have, a budget for a cut man, let alone do they even really know what we do. Then I would head to Vegas and I started just driving 8 hours because I'd lived in Idaho at that time. I just drive 8 hours one way on a weekend and go sit at Randy Couture's gym and just wrap, people there. And then of course just networked and got to know people and just worked my way up.
That's awesome. So no sort of background in training or anything?
No, of course, once I got involved in the sport, I started doing training like jujitsu, things like that. Boxing, I love boxing. It's so much fun. And kickboxing. So in that way that I trained, but there's no prior, training to be a cut man, meaning like no nursing or anything like that. That's not required. Of course, you're required to get, license in each state you work in, but yeah, no, there's no medical training even required.
So give me sort of the rundown of a day at a fight. What time would you get there? How does the day go? Because it's something that a lot of fans don't get to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's so pretty much depending on what event I work, whether it's with UFC or Bellator, or just any event really, you usually fly in like the day before the event. Now with COVID, we get tested usually the day we arrive or the very next morning. If we're negative, we can move on and we would take a shuttle to the arena that the fight will be held. And we will arrive, we'll kind of get, our bout sheet, and it'll show, how many fighters are on the card, how many hands need to be wrapped, because some fighters, have their camps do it. We get a lot of special requests. So in that case, we'll make sure that we are available at that time before that fighter has to go out, that, I'll wrap their hands, or one of the other cut men will, do their special request. Then we go cage side, we take turns cage side. Because there's still fighters arriving at all different times. So they all need their hands wrapped and stuff like that, and gloved and final tape. And then the fights go on, and last fight, we just get to pack up, go home. Usually I catch the early flight back because I got another day job that I take care of. So I got to make sure I'm back to work on Monday. So that's kind of it in a nutshell of how a fight day goes.
You mentioned special requests there. What sort of things would fighters want?
So usually they want a certain person to
Yeah.
wrap their hands. So they would ask, if they ask for myself, of course, if I'm cage side, I'll get relieved and I'll go in the back and I'll wrap, that fighter's hand that requested me. A lot of the times too, they have special requests of how they want their hands wrapped. Some fighters like their thumbs wrapped, some like them left open. Some fighters like, a loose wrap, or, if a fighter's injured, if their hand's injured, then, they'll I'll make sure that they have extra padding, that sort of stuff where it can be. And of course, we're monitored the entire time by a commissions officer. So, we're not putting like razor blades between the knuckles or anything to give them an advantage. No, right. They've joked about it. They've like, hey, you got a little something in there, some knuckles.
All right. So obviously you've talked about wrapping hands, and obviously we know the cut side of things. But is there any other responsibilities you'd have that fans maybe aren't aware of?
Not really. I've been blessed to have the experience to, go with a fighter during like a fight camp. That's not typically what we do, but a lot of our other cutmen that I work with are trainers as well, or coaches. So, I'll go check out their gym and those sorts of things. But typically, no. I mean, as a cut woman, my responsibility on a fight day is to make sure hands are wrapped and make sure, I get them to the next round when it comes to being in the cage.
So talk about that. What's that pressure like when when the horn's gone off, you've got a cut, there's 60 seconds to work? How do you feel in that moment? Because really the way the fights are going to go is kind of on your shoulders at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. The whole time I'm sitting cage side before that clapper goes off, that 10-second clapper, I'm like glued to my fighter, because a fighter could get like elbowed in the last second or right at the buzzer. And then, so the whole time, like, you got to make sure your swab is prepped for a cut, that sort of thing, because anything can happen at the last second. So usually 10 seconds before the final bell rings, at the end of a round, I'm already standing at the cage ready to go in. So I'm like sitting there ready to walk in. The bell goes off, they open the door, I get my fighter to his corner, his or her corner, and then by the time I get him set down, I've got like maybe 30 seconds to work. It's a lot of pressure, because it's my job to get that fighter to the next round. I mean, they got a lot of money on the line, or even if it's an amateur fight, like every win counts, so, and especially like with amateur fighting, there's a lot, almost more pressure, it seems, because there's a lot more precaution taken with amateur fighting. So even a cut that wouldn't look as severe as like you'd see like in UFC or Bellator or Invicta, like a fight would be called to a lesser injury in amateur. So you almost have more responsibility, it feels, when you're doing kind of the smaller shows. But I thrive on that kind of stress. Like, I love that kind of stress. That's like happy stress to me. I would say the biggest challenge in the cage almost is all the cameras, because you have to know where to step. You don't want to cut off the shot or step on people's toes. I've tripped over many people's feet in there. So it happens.
Talk about the pressure there, UFC, Bellator compared to amateurs. I wonder what it's like doing one of these bare knuckle shows now. You see how those fights go.
I've done bare knuckle a few times. I do the shows in Canada, and that's scary. I mean, because there's no protection. So for sure you're going to get work, which is great to keep me on my game. But at the same time, I'm scared of the injuries that are going to commence in there. I mean, they are intense. I don't know if you watched the last bare knuckle fight. Holy cow. That last card, like there was 2 girls, they were just pulped. I don't even know. That stuff's scary.
So what is that? Is there a hardest thing to treat? Is it maybe a different type of cut or a different position? What's the hardest thing to work on?
I'd say what challenges me the most is swelling, because swelling itself can stop a fight. If it's anywhere in the field of vision, swelling, it's so hard, because it's got a mind of its own. It's going to do whatever it does, and all we have, is our end swell or our ice pack, and you can only hold it for so long. So it's challenging more if you have like swelling and a cut, because you're like, all right, which one takes priority? Okay, well, the cut, because it's bleeding, it could drip in the eye. Anything that's cut like in the eyelid or above, a lot of the cuts right on the nose are very hard. I personally hate nosebleeds, because those are super challenging. You know what? They're all challenging. as I'm going down the list, I'm like, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks.
So just offhand, is there any cuts that come to mind that like these are like the worst cuts you've ever had to work on? Any maybe UFC cuts that people might know?
You know, oh gosh, always first one to mind is actually Leslie Smith's ear.
Oh,
That was kind
yeah.
of my first biggest. Yeah, you've seen that one. I just explodes, and just to go to show you that a cut doesn't have to be on the face to stop a fight. Like that was on her ear, but the doctor called it regardless, even though the bleeding had stopped and she wanted to continue. The doctor's like, "No, your ear's gonna fall off," and she's like, "I don't care if my ear falls off." So, that's like the first one, that comes to mind. But
Yeah.
like I don't know, you see other fighters, you kind of know as they come out, like Diego Sanchez, you're like, they have a lot of scar tissue and you're thinking, oh man, or Ross Pearson. There was a fight I worked with Ross Pearson. I was in his corner and he's had work done, there's damage under there. And so when they get hit, it's just the most like, it's going to be a bloody fight kind of. And I remember I went in there and he was just covered in blood and I went to go wipe off his face. And as I did it, he just lifted his glove up and it just brushed across my cheek and there was blood. And I remember he looked at me like he thought like he punched me and I'm bleeding. I mean, it totally took him by surprise and scared him. And then he realized that no, it wasn't, he didn't hurt me, but
When you've got a guy like that, you've got to be sort of squirming every time you see him get touched, haven't you?
yeah, I mean, you're kind of going in mentally prepared of like, okay, he's going to open up at some point. Like, I just need to make sure I got my swabs ready. I got to get it all ready. Cause yeah, some of these guys, they just open really easy and everyone's skin is so different. Like that's why I like to tell fighters, like, just make sure you moisturize daily. Like you need to do it. It'll cut down on your cuts a little bit.
So obviously, you're the only cut woman in the UFC, working UFC events rather. We've got a lot of women's fighters now, but there isn't a lot of women doing these outside the cage roles, be it cut women, referees, judges. What do you think of that, and why do you think that is?
Well, I can only speak based on my personal experience. It was really hard for me to get to where I am today. If you just, UFC is the pinnacle. It was very hard for me to get there. And once you get there, it's harder to stay there. So, I just think a lot of people, if they don't want it bad enough, they're going to back out and give up. I mean, because you're going to be told no all the time. And there's many times I wanted to quit. So I just think, and that's why I'm hoping with me being like the first one, that I was able to pave the path or clear it good enough that people don't have to struggle as bad to get up to do what they want to do, whether it be any position in MMA. But I don't know. I can just only imagine that maybe they just give up a little too soon, because there's still a lot of pushback.
You mentioned the pushback. Do you ever maybe get treated differently by a coach or a fighter or whoever just because you're a woman? Does that still happen, even though you have a bit of a name now?
It doesn't happen as often, which I'm thankful for, which I worked hard for. But before, I mean, it still happens. I mean, even if it's a religious reason, I still will run into that, of course. But I mean, there's still, and here's one thing, it's like, I never actually get pushback from the fighter itself. It's more their camp, it's more what the camp wants for their fighters. So the fighters have been just fabulous. And when it's fight day, they don't care about anything other than just getting in that cage and getting that W. So I have had a lot of pushback coming up to where I am today, but I am thankful that it doesn't happen quite as much as it used to.
On the flip side, who are some of the nicest fighters you've had the pleasure of working with?
Oh my gosh. I love Amanda Nunes. She's so precious. And then Nina, her wife. I mean, they are two of some of the most precious people I've ever met. They are always so kind to anybody. The Diaz brothers, they are super cool. A lot of people think, they're just these hard asses and this and that, but they'll give you the time of day, whether it be a fan. And I mean, they'll give you the intimate parts of themselves. I mean, they're so sweet. I mean, love Walt Harris. He's just darling, and his family. Gosh, there's so many fighters. There are so many fighters that are so nice. It's a way shorter list of those who maybe aren't quite as nice, but they're just, I've been blessed to meet so many cool people.
You'd expect the Diaz brothers to be nice to their cut man or cut woman, given the amount of scar tissue.
Yeah, exactly.
So have you got any fun stories from this time, all the time you spent backstage with fighters? Is there any good stories that come to mind?
Gosh, there's a few good stories. One, it actually wasn't even like a UFC event. I was in this one event in like Santa Ana, California, and I think it was like a camo event, and we were in the cage. Fight was over, and all of a sudden they're locking us in the cage, and we're like the officials, myself, the fighters. They're just locking us in the cage, and then all of a sudden you see one of the fighters trying to just scale the cage and get out. And so we look around, and there's commotion going on in the stands. And what had happened was the girlfriends of both of the fighters that were fighting, and they were going at it. They were like kneeing to the face, and like it was so crazy. And they didn't want these fighters to get out and go get involved because it was this big, huge mess. That was pretty exciting. And then there was this other time I was sitting cage side, and this fighter did not, or excuse me, this coach didn't like how the fight went. It didn't go in his fighter's favor. And he picks up the wooden stool and smashes it on the ground, and just bits go flying, and it hits me in the face. And it's just craziness. And then we're walking backstage, and there's like someone having a seizure in the audience. And then there's someone who like vomited down the whole electrical system of the whole place. So all the power went out. I got stories for days.
You not had to go into the crowd to help a fan who's got a cut? Someone's fallen over, run the cut woman in?
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I have gone into the audience to help a few people out before, but it was more like in the downtime to like, oh, I have, a cut on my foot, and go wrap it up just for fun. But
So aside from your job, which fighters do you like to watch? Who are your favorites?
oh man, I really enjoyed watching George St. Pierre fight before he retired. He's a lot of fun. I love, gosh, the Diaz brothers. They're always a blast in there. Conor McGregor is fun because this dude would just show up, do his business, and walk back out. I mean, he's pretty impressive to watch. Like his skill that he has, it's good. Those are probably my first off the top of my head favorites, but man, I couldn't do what any of them do. So it's just, and I mean, I love watching Amanda. She's bomb. I mean, there's so many people. They're so great.
Similar question, but maybe aside from those guys, and for different reasons as well, who would you like to work with who you haven't had a chance to yet?
I have not had the chance. Oh gosh. That's a tough one. I wish Ronda Rousey was still in. I would have really liked to. I mean, I like Wrapped Her Hands in the Back, like Final Taper and things like that. And she is a really cool person. I would have liked to work with her a little more for sure.
Awesome. Just quickly before we finish here, the interview is not going to be out before the fight, but Usman and Burns tonight. How do you see that fight going?
Oh, geez. I was thinking about that when I looked at the fight card. I'm thinking, oh my God, I think Usman's got a really, really good chance here. I think it's going to be TKO personally. And I love them both. I think they're both fantastic, but I know personally that he's been working real, real hard. So I'm kind of rooting for the guy.
Have you had a chance to rap either of those guys or not?
No, I haven't had the chance to rap either of them. One day.
One day. Just quickly, obviously we're in the pandemic. How has work been really? Because obviously there's a lot less regional shows. So how hard has it been to keep this going?
It's been hard. I mean, even though I'm in it, like it's still a hustle. Every event is a hustle. You got to fight for that show. And it's really hard now with the pandemic because all of us are hungry. We all want that card. It's like, we want this card. We want to work every weekend. And it's been really, really tough and really stressful. It's kind of sad. A lot of people say, well, when's your next UFC event? And I'm like, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we just did Yas Island, in Abu Dhabi again, and they usually use a different team for there. So the US team doesn't go. And it's like, our opportunities are kind of dwindling right now with the pandemic. But I mean, if anyone can uphold it, it's the UFC, man. They've been rocking out. They've been keeping us safe, and they've been getting more cards out. And it's just, it's only going up from here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time today. How can people keep up with you, and anything you want to shout out quickly?
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you being a platform that I can talk about what I do. anyone can follow me on, gosh, I have Instagram, Facebook, just Swayze Valentine. We have a new YouTube channel called That Family, which is super fun. They can just, a lot of people like to see what I do at home in my home life. So it's kind of that. And yeah, just if you hit me up, I'll write you back and just stay connected. It's fun.
Awesome. Thanks for the time today. Hopefully we see you on a UFC or Bellator soon.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.